So what we're going to be talking about. I am going to give a brief overview of what the Empowerment Project is and what the model is for the project. Andrew will then talk about community building and empowerment with gay millennials. Claire will talk about the continuing importance of peer education and health promotion. And then I will finish with some more detailed technical information about how we do our online engagement. So the empowerment model was developed by the University of California at San Francisco in the late 90s, and it's been adapted all over the United States in dozens of communities. And the good thing about the model is that it can be adapted to different cities, different populations. In the States, it's usually done more often for African American communities and Latino communities. We're the first to implement the project in Canada, which has had some unique implementation problems, but also opportunities. So the program runs on these guiding principles, and the main point of the project is to create a stronger and healthier young gay men's community by having a social focus. So it acknowledges the fact that young gay guys generally don't want to go and engage with community organizations because they're either seen as not cool, or because if it's an HIV organization, because the stigma around HIV, that they're just not going to go to that. So the program is not advertised as a health promotion program or as an HIV prevention program. It's advertised simply as a community building, events-based program. So it's a little tricky to start out. I'll talk about that, the engagement portion in a second. The point, however, is to bring in guys, build their trust, get them a part of this community, and then get them into health promotion activities, whether it's joining the group itself and volunteering and doing outreach, or the main purpose, which is to get them to come to a one-off 3-hour health promotion workshop that covers safer sex, shame, internalized homophobia, healthier relationships, and that sort of thing. So at its core, it is an engagement program, but obviously the education portion is also important. So we call this incremental engagement. And so the idea is that someone comes to a social event, they kind of figure out what the program's about. Maybe they don't want to get involved at that point, but then we invite them to another social event, and we keep doing follow-up. They eventually become a part of the larger empowerment community. They'll come to a discussion night, and then a lot of them will then be inspired to want to get involved and will join the volunteer group. That volunteer group is called the core group, and it's 15 to 25 young gay guys, and they meet every week on Tuesday nights. And so they plan these outreach and social events. They train to be facilitators for the education programs, and also have a lot of fun. And then after their meetings, there's a drop-in for anyone from the young gay community to come in. The goal for the program is to have 1,000 workshop participants over 4 years, which works out to 20% of the young gay population of Metro Vancouver based on estimates from HIMSS community consultation that they did a couple years ago. Obviously, that number is very hard to measure, but we just thought 1,000 worked out, and it's a good thing to aspire to. So the history of Empowerment YVR, which is the Empowerment Project in Vancouver. So this started out in 2010 after the Man Count survey, which showed that there was definitely a need for more programs and more community-based programs for younger gay guys. As our response at YouthCo to the Man Count survey, we started seeking out an evidence-based intervention that would complement the work of the Health Initiative for Men, which, if you know their work, they do great campaigns, a lot of online materials, and counseling and that sort of thing. So we thought we wanted to go a little bit more kind of a grassroots, community-driven program. In 2011, we launched an engagement campaign to start getting people interested and to get them wanting to join the program. We partnered with the University of California, who gave us their 500-page implementation manual, which we had to adapt to the Vancouver situation, but then also in the Canadian context, which is totally different. And we've butted heads with them a couple times around differences in philosophy between the two countries, or at least the way that health programs need to be implemented. We partnered with the Health Initiative for Men and the Totally Outright program to recruit people for the very first core group from the Totally Outright program. And we launched 18 months ago in May. We have support from PHAC, TD Bank, TELUS, and also Vancouver Foundation. So we've been running for 18 months. We've had over 40 workshops and discussion nights. We've had 1,400 total social event attendees. This is all under the age of 29. 770 unique attendees, 200 unique workshop participants, and probably more than double that because people come back to workshops. So this works out to, again, based on the previous estimates of population, to 15% of gay guys aged 18 to 29 have engaged with the program to some degree after a year and a half. So we're on target for sure. We've been recognized by the University of California as one of the most well-attended and definitely the most innovative online program in all of North America. And I think a lot of that has to do with the supportive environment in Vancouver. A lot of empowerment projects around the United States have absolutely no support from other organizations or their local governments. And so that's a unique thing that we get to deal with. So millennials, what are we talking about when we say millennials? So I'm glad that Terry brought it up earlier, kind of highlighting those differences and misconceptions. For our purposes, this is people born between 1982 and 2000. I'm kind of an elderly millennial, 1983. We have a range of other ones here. Our political worldview has been shaped by 9/11, the Great Recession, and importantly, and I'll talk about later, the rise of tech-enabled social movements, specifically anti-globalization, the Occupy movement, marriage equality, the Arab Spring, etc. We're digital natives. We've always had computers, although I haven't always had computers, cell phones, and social media. It's a very socially conscious generation. There's just so much information out there and so many ways to connect that everyone's pretty much aware of a multitude of issues. And there's a general spirit of support for human rights and social justice. There are economic issues for millennials in that we're generally underemployed and have trouble keeping up with the increasing cost of living. And this affects the gay community in that a lot of our participants no longer live downtown. Gay millennials. So gay millennials are coming out younger. As we know from the Sex Now survey, a higher percentage are experiencing bullying because they're coming out earlier. In Canada, marriage equality has always existed. It was never really an issue for them. Online sex and dating has always been the norm. I mentioned the cost of living. We're increasingly urban, however, also rural, because gay communities are starting to pop up in smaller cities, and that was discussed previously. We've been raised on internet porn, but are still not receiving any gay sex education. We know from Sex Now, Man Count, other places as well, that there is a strong desire amongst young guys for a stronger gay community, and there is a strong desire to be involved and to make a difference. Awesome. And on that note, I will turn it over to Andrew.
Good morning. My name is Andrew Shopland. I've been the Empowerment Project Coordinator since June, and I've actually been living in Vancouver for exactly a year now. Last year's conference was a wonderful introduction to moving here. Before that, I lived in Victoria. I was there for about 6 years, and I worked with AIDS Vancouver Island and a bunch of stuff at UVic as well. So if you look on the program, you'll see that there's 6 names, because the goal was to have 3 staff members and 3 core group members. And you'll see that is not the case. One of them couldn't due to conflicts that we found out earlier. And unfortunately, Austin, we only found out last night he couldn't come. Part of what he was going to be talking about was telling his story of his relationship to empowerment. And so late at night on Facebook, we coordinated what was going to happen today. So I will be voicing his story via Facebook, which is actually pretty appropriate. So, and this is written in his words, just pretend I'm him. Growing up as a gay man outside of the Lower Mainland, I never knew what to expect when I first experienced the Vancouver gay scene. I can't say what I encountered was either positive or negative, but was definitely an eye-opener. I think that we experience a longing for a sense of belonging. Growing up where I did in Langley, I was never really exposed to homosexuality and therefore didn't know what to expect of the gay culture or lack thereof. I think I speak for most gay men when I say that there is a need to discover our culture and determine those parameters. As I started to make a few core friends within the Vancouver community, I was introduced to alternatives to the nightlife, one of the most influential being empowerment. For me, one of the best parts about being a part of the empowerment core group is being surrounded by a community of great guys who are like-minded, passionate, and involved in their community. I can confidently say that I have learned so much about who I am and what it means to be a part of a healthy, sex-positive environment, yet at the same time, not feel any pressure to connect with the other guys on a sexual level. As opposed to most of the other gay scene activities, which focus primarily on the sexual encounter and leave the individual still craving a sense of community or inclusion. It is so important that other young LGBTQ individuals get to experience empowerment and like-minded organizations, and are able to feel a part of such a welcoming community. Most of my closest friends are people I have met at events hosted by Empowerment or at the Unmasked evenings, Unmasked being our core workshop. So Austin is definitely a success story for us, and following the sort of the migration pattern of moving to the big city and finding empowerment as a point of entry to the gay community. So a lot of people talk about how great things are these days. And it's true, some stuff has really changed. We have amazing new avenues of communication. Like, they actually made an app that's gaydar. You can just find gay guys around you. That would have sounded magical 20 years ago. And there's a range of dating and cruising sites. So communication and finding other gay guys and talking to them, effortless now. We also have a much more of a culture of tolerance. In Vancouver, Pride is now a civic event. Lots of school districts have policies around having gay-straight alliances or queer-straight alliances in schools. It's starting to be safe to live outside Davie Village, which is good because most of us can't afford to live there. And we have same-sex marriage. So, like, we've made it, right? So, here's two spaces we have for young gay guys. We've got Grindr, we've got gay bars. And I need my water. First off, I think both of these are awesome. And when I'm looking for what they can offer me, they're really great. However, in both of these spaces, I see a lot of people looking for something that isn't offered. So I see sort of three main issues with these sorts of spaces. The first is, the best work I could come up with is that they're apolitical. And the best example would be on Grindr, where it's completely appropriate to present racism and present body shaming and gender policing as part of one's presentation on profile. There's nothing technical preventing Grindr from not having that, but they choose to perpetuate those sorts of cultures. In both environments, they're highly sexualized. When a headless torso is talking to me, it's kind of hard not to objectify them, because we are self-objectifying, and it's so easy to objectify other people. And finally, they really lack intimacy. It's not that it's impossible to experience intimacy in those spaces. It's just extraordinarily challenging, and for the most part, the cultures of those environments aren't really interested in that. So when I started at Empowerment, one of the things we did was we did a really great brainstorm where everyone just did a sort of a 1-2 sentence description of what empowerment meant to them. And I just took those descriptions and stuck them in a word cloud, and it was really obvious what was important to them. So community, people, events, guys. Very few people came to Empowerment to consume health promotion. That's certainly a side effect of it, but really they came for the community. I would say it's so easy to get communication intolerance, but that's not what guys want. Really what we're looking for is connection and acceptance. And at Empowerment, we can create those things. One of the things I found most surprising was I thought as a facilitator I would have to like pull teeth to get guys to talk about their feelings and to open up about stuff. It's actually quite the opposite. As soon as there's any sort of space for that, it just comes pouring out. There's such a demand for it. Along the lines of inclusion, we at YouthCo bring a strong value of anti-oppression. And so in creating our programming, we actively challenge racism and body shaming and gender policing and stuff like that, which is definitely different than other spaces. It's a non-sexualized and sex-positive space, which I think is important for everybody, but extremely important for people who are just coming out and exploring that part of their identities, often later in the life course, than they would have been expected to going through puberty. And finally, it's youth run at YouthCo. For those of you not familiar with the organization, everyone, staff, members, volunteers, and our board are under 30. There's for sure challenges from that, but I think for the most part, it really allows us to create a space where what youth want and need is at the forefront. So I really appreciate that Nathaniel already brought you guys into the world of geography, because we're going to get into some social geography. Henry Lefebvre talked about the production of space. And there's sort of two things here. One is that space is socially constructed based on values and the social productions of meaning, and that this process of constructing space is fundamental to the reproduction of society. So he was a Marxist, and the quote below, he was basically critiquing the Marxist urban planners of the 20s and 30s, basically saying they didn't build a city for Marxism to happen in. They just built a city for capitalism and then expected Marxism to come out of it. Okay, now we'll come back to gay men's health. Change life, change society. These ideas lose completely their meaning without producing an appropriate space. New social relations demand a new space, and vice versa. Really, the goal of empowerment is to create new social relations. We are changing how young gay men interact and changing the community in which, and changing the conditions under which, like at the very base level, like HIV transmission occurs. If we never interacted with each other, or only interacted online, never saw each other in person, HIV couldn't be transmitted. But we do interact in person. And so if we can change the conditions under which we interact, we can change health outcomes. So at Empowerment, we consciously create this space. I think a big part of it is because we bring in these defined values and expectations for what's going to happen, we can do stuff like in bars or like in social networking sites, but the outcomes are very different. And I've got a couple examples of that next. Another big thing is that we build a container over time. So with the incremental engagement model, we meet people in a social setting, and then they might come to drop in and chat on a more intimate level. And they might come to one of our workshops and some of our discussions. Excuse me. And each time, we're building a relationship, and we're building the container for learning and for community development to happen in. That container is certainly built by shared experiences and intimacy. Like in our workshops and in our discussion groups, we talk about stuff that we don't get to talk about in the rest of our lives. Sex, relationships, those sorts of things. And I think we get sort of a positive feedback cycle where each new engagement, guys get more open and the community norm becomes more open. So once someone brand new comes in, they step into a room where all of the other guys are already comfortable talking about this sort of stuff and being open and accepting. So this is what our physical space looks like. On the left, we've got sort of our main space upstairs where we do our workshops. And then downstairs, we've got this really cool loft space, and we use it for events and parties. This was a back-to-school party we did, NERDTASTIC. And we had alcohol, and we had young gay guys, and we had loud music, and we had flashing lights. And it didn't feel like a club. It felt really comfortable. A lot of guys were like, this is weird. It feels comfortable. And I really think it's because A, the intentions behind it, and B, the work that had been done in advance. Like a lot of the people had already engaged with us, had been to workshops there, and the expectations of being in those spaces is that it's going to be comfortable. So this is just an Instagram video. I mostly included it for the hey girl at the end. So we had a potluck for Thanksgiving, and we expected, maybe like 15, 20 people. We had 45 people. And that was so special because there was more opportunities for even more intimacy in this than at like the NERDTASTIC party. So at one point, we had almost 40 guys crammed into our upstairs space, which is not big enough for 40 people, sitting quietly, listening as we went one by one, sharing our family's Thanksgiving traditions, or lack of, and something we were thankful for. When else does that get to happen? That was so cool. So the Empowerment Project and the Empowerment model in general is based on the idea of a diffusion of innovation. So we have a couple staff people, and they connect with a core group of volunteers who connects with their social networks, and we can then diffuse out our messages into the community. And the empowerment model of empowerment, I think really allows that ripple to go even further than simply the messages being transmitted. The guys are given the skills to develop their own personal communities. So we see guys come into the core group for maybe 6 months to a year. We see that, yeah. They come in, they meet people, they get connected to a social network, they gain some new skills, specifically around like really tangible community development skills like event planning, what I would call applied inclusion. And then they go back out into their world. And I believe that they will continue these sorts of processes after they're coming to our weekly meetings. And that both empowers them as individuals, but it also empowers the community. So I think Totally Outright is a really great example of this. We've been seeing it for how many years now? Totally Outright, is it 9? 10 years? And look at the number of youth-driven presentations in this conference. Like, that is that legacy. And we're seeing a similar thing from Empowerment, where guys who were part of the original core group are continuing this work informally and formally. So the community itself has become empowered from it as well. And all of that actually leads to our education. So often people are surprised that we're having parties when we should be talking to guys about HIV. And really, we couldn't talk to them about HIV if we didn't have that party. By the time they get to our workshop, they've been in our space a few times, they've met us, they're friends with us, they follow us on Instagram. So we have a relationship, and they're already comfortable in that container. So we can jump right in to stuff that would take a little while to get like a complete stranger to open up to. And so achieving behavior change, knowledge transfer, and diffusion of knowledge can happen way more effectively. And in that process, we create new community norms, which is a big part of our goal. And to talk to you about education, we have Claire and Gabe.
Good morning. My name is Gabe. I'm currently a participant at Mpowerment, and I'm also a third-year BCC nursing student. And I'm here to share my stories about being a participant and as well as my previous experiences obtaining health information on my own.
And my name's Claire O'Gorman. I'm the Peer Education Programs Manager at YOUTHCO. And this is a position I arrived in after volunteering on YOUTHCO's peer facilitation team for a number of years. And so this team does workshops in high schools, community centers, wherever youth are at, particularly around HIV and sexual well-being, as well as harm reduction and Hep C. And so I'm here to share a little bit about that model of peer education and how we've adapted and reformed it to be applicable to young gay guys. So the millennial generation, we have a lot of information. And it is thrown at us daily. We have Twitter feeds, we have Facebook news feeds, we follow everyone on Instagram. There is a ton of information out there. And a lot of this information is sent in a very one-way broadcasted format. I noticed the other day, I actually don't really know how to read a book anymore. I was trying to read a fictional novel and I couldn't because I'm so used to scanning through tons and tons of information on a daily basis. And so the challenge with this broadcasted information is that it makes it really difficult to communicate nuances. And increasingly, HIV and HIV information and transmission information and prevention information is full of nuances. It's not as simple, and it shouldn't be as simple as wear a condom. That's far too simplistic. There's PrEP and there's PEP and there's harm reduction strategies, and all of these things require a conversation rather than that one-way dissemination of information. The other challenge with a lot of especially health promotion information is that it not only oversimplifies things, but it can also tend to be really fear-based, and in that becomes really stigmatizing. And we know that stigma is a lot of the root of our problem, and so would hate to contribute to that even more. And a lot of that shame and stigma that comes out in a lot of these messages is really rooted in the shame and stigma that surrounds sex and talking about sex, especially within our society, and especially outside of the heteronormative how to make babies conversation.
Okay, so when I was in when I was in high school, everything that I learned about, information about sex was more on the terms of heterosexual tradition. And being the only gay kid out in my high school, I didn't know how to relate to that information. And so I often would seek out information through the media or through my friends. And also growing up in a Roman Catholic family, I wasn't encouraged to talk about my sexuality with my family or my peers. And so it was important for me to kind of relate that information with people who understood me. And my friends often got their information through what they saw on the news or the internet or pornography itself.
So we know that typical sex ed can lack a lot of relevance for a lot of people. And certainly this Mean Girls meme speaks to that. So what is peer education? I trust that a lot of people in this room are familiar with the term peer education and maybe are doing some of that work already in your own world and in your own careers. But really what peer education is at its root is learning from someone we have something in common with. So taking away that traditional hierarchy of teacher, student, I know everything, you must learn from me, you know nothing. And trying to flatten that hierarchy. And what that enables is those more honest conversations. It enables increased relevance. And that's really rooted in the trust that's built by knowing that someone knows what it's like to be in our shoes. And so at YOUTHCO, we do a number of peer education workshops. Peer is defined in a lot of different ways in our work. Sometimes peer means someone has shared lived experience. Sometimes it means we have shared identity. Sometimes it means simply that we're both under the age of 30. So relate to each other in that more generational way. What peer education allows, and especially in workshop formats, is it allows us to acknowledge the information and knowledge that already exists in the room. And that's what really brings me to this work and where my passion is I truly believe that young people and youth already know what we need to do. We already know what's best for ourselves. We can make those decisions for ourselves. And the role of the facilitator is to create the space. And Andrew talks so nicely about space, but it's creating that space where we can draw out that information that already exists in the room. And so, of course, this allows that information to have that two-way conversation. We can feel comfortable asking questions. We can tease apart all of those gray areas. We can talk about, well, all the what ifs, you know. And I think that a lot of that conversation is especially important in HIV prevention, where people have a lot of questions. And if we don't have an opportunity to ask those, it can be really hard to move that information into changed action. And so having that more reflective piece in workshops, challenging people to think about new ways of being, allows us to have that self-reflexivity to change our behaviors and potentially practice as well. So turning that what into so what. Andrew talked a little bit about our values at YOUTHCO, and two of our values that are really important to our peer education work are inclusivity and sex positivity. So in this, we do our work being inclusive of everyone. We try not to make assumptions about people in the room or groups we're working with. And it sounds a little counterintuitive, but to make no assumptions, we make all assumptions. So in every group that we're working with, we assume that every lived experience could be present in the room and adjust our language accordingly. So we really work hard to use inclusive language in all of our work. And we approach talking about sex and sexuality from a very sex-positive place. So that means really being mindful and working really hard to remove that shame and stigma that's attached to sex so we can have these open and honest conversations so no one feels judged and so everyone feels included in the conversation so that the information is most relevant.
Okay. So being a part of this program, I was able to experience some of these things that you're looking at right now. And it's really easy for me to disclose my feelings and what I think and feel because I feel like I'm relating to other people that are very much like myself. And it is important for me to do that because I remember sitting in the doctor's office and it was a man who I didn't even know, and it was really hard for me to kind of open up about my health practices because I felt like there was like a sense of judgment or he didn't really get me. And being able to be part of the group and talk to guys my age and get information that was valid really helped me to kind of understand and build a more concrete idea of what a healthy practice is. And it's also feeling like you're safe too. You know, it's really important for young gay men to feel that they have that safe space, feel like they're belonged, and kind of be part of a meaning together. So the way the program kind of works down, when I went to it, we would usually sit down for like maybe 10, 20 minutes and kind of talk about our day. And I really liked that because it got a chance for me to meet these guys and feel kind of like connected to them and say, hey, I'm not so much different than you. And then once you kind of get that going, it kind of breaks down the barriers or not feeling like you have to kind of withhold yourself. And it's easy to kind of, as I said, to disclose yourself and your real thoughts and feelings. And we talk about healthy relationships. We talk about how we feel as gay men in a straight world. And we talk about how we can take care of each other. And this would include being able to support one another, being able to listen to one another, and to kind of encourage the practices that we feel are healthy for each other as well. And it's a great way to kind of have peers, talk about safe practices. And I was surprised, even when going my first meeting, because I felt like I had a good understanding. Going through nursing school, I thought I knew everything. But the way that the approach was set out, I learned much more from my peers necessarily than from somebody who thought they knew better than me or that has a higher education or so forth. The workshops really help kind of strengthen that community and strengthen the bonds that you have with your peers. And I find that kind of witnessing all this, the members kind of go home with this information and they carry it with themselves. And going back to that peer relational practice, I know I mentioned a lot about bonding and being able to connect. And in my practice as a student nurse, being able to connect to people is really important. You can do all the science things all you like to, but the message doesn't really stay at home. We're all human beings. And the idea that we're able to form these relationships with guys that are very similar to yourself, it makes it more meaningful, and it makes it kind of more of a sense that you could carry this with you and implement it within your own life. This is a great time to use to kind of follow up and to kind of build the strengthening of what we learned in the program.
So that, of course, was just a quick overview of what the workshops actually look like. And if you're interested, we have them on an ongoing basis if you would like to participate. And of course, we know that by doing these workshops, we're not just telling people information that's irrelevant in the Google age. We are building relationships. And so to talk a little bit more about how we continue those relationships on an ongoing basis, I'm going to invite Michael to come back up and share some information about community organizing.
Thank you, Claire. So when I first started setting up the Empowerment Project 2 years ago, the biggest problem was, oh my God, how are we going to get people to come? And we obviously knew that social media would play a part in that, but we weren't entirely sure how that would work. So for us, as was previously mentioned, it's about building relationships, and it's about doing it sometimes over a long period of time. And I think this is where a lot of community organizations maybe fall flat, is that they're not necessarily putting in the time to build relationships with individuals on a consistent basis, mainly because it's very hard to track those individuals and remember who they are. And so we really wanted to address that problem. And so for us, engagement is reaching out into the community through our events, through outreach, developing those relationships, fostering a community around the program, sharing our vision, building trust, and then step number 6 is the action part. So that might be them coming to a workshop or coming and getting involved. And so that can take a long time depending on people's comfort level with other gay guys, their ability to even come to the program depending on where they live. So this can take months. And then the all-important thing afterwards, after you've got them engaged, is to keep them engaged and to bring new people. So young guys, we hear a lot of excuses from other organizations and just maybe from other generations about engaging young gay guys in health programs. And so I just thought we might address a few of them today. First, young guys don't want to come to our programs. That's probably true, and it's probably because they aren't fun programs. And so guys want to go to places that they want to go to, they'll go. The programs need to be tailored to the needs and wants of the population. The other one kind of alluded to by Terry in the attitudes towards millennials, young guys are apathetic and just don't care. That's because they're not being inspired, most likely. Our generation kind of has a taste for the dramatic and the emotional, and we're used to tearjerker videos and, the Obama campaign, and we expect to be stirred to action. It's hard to reach or find young gay guys. Well, this is actually the easiest generation to reach in the history of all humanity. You basically have a directory of every human being online at your disposal, and it's just a matter of getting to them. This generation is lazy and self-entitled. I won't even address that. That was mentioned earlier. That is said about every single generation. We can't relate to younger guys, and this is valid, and this is why we think having an organization like YouthCo is important, because of that peer influence and the trust that develops out of that. We would challenge other organizations to hire younger staff, seeing as a lot of us don't have jobs, and to truly empower a group of younger volunteers to be able to control the program for themselves. The young guys we do find aren't high risk enough. And so this is something that comes up, especially when we're trying to meet population targets for our funders and that sort of thing. There's no standard demographic profile for a young gay male who gets HIV. And so when you go looking for specific people, you're ignoring everyone else. And it just takes that one time of not using a condom that can happen to anyone. So our philosophy is to target the community, and eventually you'll reach everyone organically through their social networks. So then there's also a few excuses around using social media. One is social media doesn't actually accomplish anything, we don't have the staff time, our communications policies are too strict, people can say things on our Facebook page that are mean, and then we'll have to respond to that. And that having followers, fans, and likes don't actually mean anything. That's all true if we allow them to be true. And so we have to move towards using social media at a professional level versus just at the personal level. So social media at YouthCo. For our generation, the first Obama campaign was a big deal in terms of inspiring people and motivating them to make change in their communities. It was also the first campaign to effectively use social media for community organizing. And we learned from this when we were setting up our social media program in 2008. And we thought that it would be good to decentralize control of social media to the programs so that they control it for themselves. Only delete things in extreme circumstances, engage in a dialogue, and to have a specific strategy for each platform that you're using. So YouthCo currently has 12 social media accounts on 5 platforms targeting specific youth communities. They're all branded for their specific programs, for Aboriginal youth, for gay youth through Mpowerment, and it's controlled by many staff and volunteers. We use them for different things. So Facebook is more of a directory of people. It's for communication. It's for event promotion. Young people don't read emails anymore, basically, so we send them Facebook messages. Twitter we use for professional and informative information. Instagram, we post pictures and videos from events that have happened already. Tumblr, we just let the volunteers do that. I don't even know what's on there right now. YouTube, we make videos, email, like I said, texting, people who are close to the program and who opt in to being texted, we now have mass texting that we use to connect with people. And we get instant responses from that method. Facebook advertising, if you're not using it for health promotion, you should start. It is extremely cost effective. You can use a hyper-targeted audience. And you can target people based on personal characteristics as well as their relationships, so who they're friends with, as well as what pages they've liked. If this all sounds overwhelming, it is. And so there are new programs that we use that allow us to manage all of this. So Hootsuite, which you may have heard, it's a local Vancouver company. It's pretty big worldwide now. And this centralizes control of all of your Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn accounts into one dashboard, and this multiple people can access it at once, and then managers can go and see what everyone's doing. The new program that we're using is called NATIONBUILDER, and this is a social CRM database, and if you know what CRM means, it's Contact Relationship Manager. This came out of Obama's first campaign. The guys who developed their online strategy went on to found this company. It manages your contacts via email, phone, texting, Facebook, Twitter, as well as your live events, and brings it all into one database where you can manage a community. And that's what it is, the world's first community organizing system. A lot of organizations would use something similar to this for fundraising or volunteer management. We use it for the program itself. So as was mentioned earlier, why is this important? Why are we doing this? It's because there's a large demand and inclination among millennials for digital activism. So like I mentioned, there are these technology-enabled social movements that we've grown up with and protests of the past 15 years, from anti-globalization in the late 90s through to the Arab Spring and Idle No More recently. And millennials really do see this type of movement as a way to achieve human rights and social justice. But what makes such digital movement building successful? Well, it's inspiring or organizing real-world action. If you only have people doing stuff online, it's not good enough. And that's where the Nation Builder program comes in. So the value of a like or comment on Facebook has absolutely no value if you don't follow up with it. So each time someone interacts with our page or post, it's an invitation for us to talk to them. Not once has someone written back and been like, oh my God, who are you? This is creepy. It's because they've actually made that first step. We have to start thinking of that first engagement as them taking the step forward and wanting to be engaged. And that's the hardest thing, is to get noticed. And they've already noticed you, so follow up on it. And it's not a cold contact. If they've seen your post, they either like your page or you have friends in common, and you can reference that. So this is what a dashboard on Nation Builder looks like. So as you can see, I've used Andrew as an example. So this shows in Nation Builder, it tracks people who have liked our Facebook posts, and I've blacked out the names of the other people. So this keeps a running tab of people who like our page or comment on our page. We can then go in the next day. And so we have Andrew's profile in the database. That's his Facebook picture. The program automatically tags him with MP General, which is Empowerment General, so he enters our general communication list immediately. It's flagged for initial outreach and is sent to a coordinator to follow up with. All this information that is here has either been given to us voluntarily at some other point in time or comes off of your public profile. Nation Builder will match up names from Twitter and Facebook to people who may have come to events previously and merge them together and make that connection for you. So challenges with this. Obviously, confidentiality, privacy is always an issue. Like I said, we don't input anyone's information without their consent. And the rest of it is all public information. We definitely distinguish between community organizing data, which is kept in Nation Builder, which only staff can access, separate from service and health data. As a health organization, that's very important. We keep paper records for any services and referrals, and events and social media is kept separate. Building relationships across demographics within the youth community can sometimes be difficult. You get stuck in the same social networks. And so that's when we bring in a new member to the core group who we think could expand that network. The program has skewed younger since we started, so we're getting down to 16 to 24 years old now, which is great, but it also creates a problem with guys in their late 20s not wanting to hang out with teenagers. And so maybe creating a separate targeted program for that age group, which has a different set of issues as gay guys. So just to sum up, I'll bring Andrew back.
So, some of the lessons learned from empowerment. Peer education is more important than ever. We've seen that in how effective we've been, and we've gotten that as direct feedback. People really like the way we do our workshops. There is a huge desire from young guys to be doing this work. We don't have to prompt them to want to build stronger, healthier gay community. They already want to do this. They just need to be empowered to do that. One way is to provide them a voice at the table. And I think especially when that's a table of mixed generations, we need our elders to listen to us and not to judge us. I think there's a lot of talk about intergenerational mentorship sort of going like that, and it should be going in all the different directions. Social media is by far the best way to reach this population. I honestly could not do my job without NATIONBUILDER and Facebook. And I did not expect to have a job where I spent so much time on Facebook, getting paid, and actually working. But it needs to be done relevantly and intentionally. So we're not just trying to get likes for likes' sake. We're trying to get likes to then do something. Taking a community organizing approach to health programs is powerful. Like I said, occasionally, every so often, someone comes to us and says, I want to learn more about these specific health topics. That is very rare, though. For the most part, guys are coming because they want community. And if they already want to come to us for community and then we toss the health program in with that, both sides are getting something that they want. And finally, youth are passionate and knowledgeable. Like Claire was saying, we already know what's going on. And really, if we can empower them to reach their potential, they will be able to go further than even we could push them. So here we are on social media. You can see email is the dead last. I get an email to that email account every couple weeks, whereas Facebook, we have constant new people. Yeah, so that's it for our presentation. And you should like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and Twitter and subscribe to us on YouTube and don't email us. And we're good to go. Are there any questions?
Yeah, we'll open up for questions and discussion.